Thank you so much for doing this, Emilia. And welcome to this show. I don't have a name for this, but I just like to chat with other marketing and growth leaders, learn what I can, and share with other folks on the internet. So thank you so much for taking out the time for this.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Usman.
All right. So I have so much to discuss with you, so much to get your thoughts on. So let's just get started. So I really want to start with the fact that you have scaled a marketing team, right? On UserPilot, I know, as far as I know, you were the first marketing hire, and now you have a massive marketing department that you're running, and you're producing content across so many different marketing channels, doing so much innovative stuff. So my first question for you would be, how does it differ to lead the marketing team for an early stage company back then when UserPilot was a small company versus not so early stage at this point?
Yeah. Well, there is a massive difference. I wouldn't call our department massive at this point. I think we're around 10 people. Let me think, with all the new hires in the content team. That's excluding the freelancers, right? So around 10 full-time in-house, and then also around 10 freelance content writers. So the main difference is that when I joined, obviously I was an all sort of hands man in UserPilot, and I was doing everything myself. So my work was focused mostly on execution and like testing different channels, seeing what sticks. I feel, since then I've grown both as a marketer and as a manager, and like we all have grown on the company. The company has grown. Everyone from the founding team and the CEO and everyone else has grown. So we kind of approach things very differently. Also, the industry has grown. I see, such a massive difference in like the quality of work and in general, right? And B2B SaaS content and the maturity of the processes. It kind of feels, it was only 3.5 years ago, but it feels like a completely different world, so to say. So yeah, a massive difference.
And can you walk us through how do you prioritize time across different channels that you're working on, since now you have teams and distributing content across different kind of channels?
Yeah, so the main focus is where the most ROI lies for us. So this is pretty straightforward. We operate as a really lean startup, I would say. So we don't kind of splash around our budget on things that we're not sure are going to bring the ROI, or maybe a bit like where the experiment costs, like say more than $1,000, then we already think twice if it makes sense to invest in this experiment now that we have certain proven channels that are bringing in ROI and that are not exhausted yet. So the main channel for us is, and will be still for a while, SEO content. So 85% of our leads come from the organic channel. And this is where we're also focusing roughly 80% of our efforts and budget. This also means that I'm quite involved in also hands-on work in content still. So I'm still involved in things that you wouldn't probably expect, like content updates. So for critical content pieces, they are very, very bottom of the funnel. I'm still involved in that because obviously I've been in the team the longest, so I know the product probably the most intimately at this point. The same for other managers on the marketing team, the head of content, senior content manager, head of growth. They're all involved in like actually hands-on content work. Although this team is also the largest, right? So we already have a hierarchical structure there. We have a head of content who's responsible for keyword research and making content plans. We have a senior content manager who's responsible for doing all the editorial work still, but also helping with training the more junior content team members. And then we have the content editors per se that are responsible for producing briefs. Maybe less so helping with content updates yet, because, yeah, as I said, this particular task requires a bit more experience, but also helping with programmatic SEO and managing the writers, of course. So I'm not directly involved in managing the content editors or the writers anymore, because this is like the job of the head of content and the editors.
So you mentioned quite a few things there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the interesting things that you mentioned is that SEO is still one of the biggest drivers for UserPilot when it comes to conversions and leads. And I'm curious, in this new era of dark social, I shouldn't say new era, by the way, maybe it has been there ever since marketing started, but how significant do you think SEO is as a growth channel in an era where dark social is the thing now? So what are your thoughts?
I think extremely significant for B2B SaaS, especially, maybe less so for lifestyle brands, right? So again, there is no one size fits all, silver bullet advice that applies to all types of companies. Even within B2B SaaS, there will be exceptions, etc. So you always need to approach the situation individually and test. So kind of disclaimer over. For us, for B2B SaaS, most of B2B SaaS, I think it still plays an enormous role, because in our industry, in our niche, people don't go on social to search for solutions, right? They are still pretty divorced. Their public, their professional persona with their like individual lives, personal lives, they're still pretty divorced from each other. So like the social media also play a role, and dark social of course plays a role, but it's more like a demand gen channel. So someone who's not actively looking for a solution may see, our webinars, may see our events, like Product Drive, which is a big industry conference. We kind of get ideas, get inspiration, and get interested in, the topic, and like say PLG, and get a like spark, oh, maybe we should invest in this. But for people that are actively looking for a solution, for people that are solution aware and even product aware, they will be Googling things like app queues versus Pendo checklist, right? Because they want to see, or they will like literally Google long-tailed keywords like, does app queues have a checklist? Does Pendo have a resource center? Does UserPilot have a resource center? You wouldn't type that kind of keyword into Instagram, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So it looks like there's a lot of demand for UserPilot to capture before thinking of maybe heavily investing into new demand creation channels.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So how do you think of measuring ROI from the content that you invest in, specifically the content that you're creating for organic search? Because you mentioned like a big proportion of your conversions are coming from SEO. Is it like when it comes to the attribution model, is it like first touch? Is it like a linear model? How are you defining conversions and attribution model more precisely?
Yeah, so kind of we do it pretty conservatively, and I know this is missing a lot of the bigger picture, but just kind of for accounting purposes, we're looking at last touch conversions. So we're kind of looking at directly attributable ROI to a specific blog post. So we're looking at these last touch conversions for our entire blog, right? And then having historical data on how much we've been spending on the blog. We can like pile it all up together and then, calculate, let's say, the ROI on this sort of in the longer perspective. This is quite challenging already, even if you use the last touch attribution, which is easier to calculate than the first touch attribution in this case. But it's still challenging because the old posts that were produced, say 3 years ago, right, at a different price are still driving conversions, and they have been driving conversions for like 3 years now. And the challenge is that these conversions had, for instance, different ACV, right? As your product grows, as the company grows, as you're going up market, your ACV, so average contract value, is increasing. And it becomes like super complex to calculate it, over time, because SEO is an evergreen channel, which is amazing because, we had this big issue. I mean, we as the industry, right? Like you were probably following the news with the Silicon Valley Bank, right? So a lot of startups will be left, at least temporarily, without access to their operating capital. In that case, even if they had to cut all investment and growth, like the old posts would still be driving conversions, even if they didn't have time to maintain them. As long as the servers are running, yes, they might drop in SERPs a bit, but they would still be driving conversions. So the thing is, it's an evergreen channel, and it's pretty tricky to calculate the accurate ROI, because you would need to look at all these like different ACVs, also different conversion rates, because whether you're purely product-led and self-serve or whether you have a sales team, you still have different conversion rates over time. So kind of to cut the long story short, trying to simplify this, we're taking the annual, content budget, and we're looking, at the new posts and how much they were driving, how many demos they were driving, basically what is our open rate, what is our close rate in that time period, and what is our ACV in that period. So we can see, like, in this accounting period, the year, the content that we produced in the year has driven so and so much conversion. But this doesn't really show the full picture, because this content will keep converting for years to come at potentially higher ACV. So the beautiful thing about this is that looking at ROI in this way, you see the worst possible scenario, right? So you kind of have a narrow view of what is the bare minimum that you're producing within like a specific period you're looking at. But you do know, as the marketer and as a leader, you need to communicate that to your executives, that this is a gift that keeps on giving, and the ROI keeps growing over time. This is it's great, because your ACV is increasing over time, but the production costs actually stay, the same.
It sounds like all of the other kind of things that are hard to attribute in marketing sound cool, unless you have to, justify the investment that goes into content production and those kind of things. Then you're kind of like back to the old school things, because, most of the things that we're talking about in 2023 revolve around these abstract ideas of marketing, and you cannot justify them in a Google Sheet, for example, right? So,
I still can't figure out what demand gen really means.
Well, a lot of people just call it a buzzword around brand awareness, but maybe it's probably the same thing, but a new term to explore in this year.
I saw your comment under Kevin Indig's post. I think, or was it Ellie Schwartz? I think it was Ellie Schwartz, and that really caught my attention. Because I feel like SEO totally can be a demand gen channel. And I even listened to, it was still like several years ago, it was a podcast by Neil Patel. And he was talking about, how you can drive, it wasn't called demand at that point, it wasn't called demand generation, but how you can essentially do that by creating SEO content that's outside of your awareness funnel. So pretty much what you mentioned in that comment. Sorry, kind of going off the tangent here.
No, but it makes sense. I think we can put whatever terminology works for us, like define it in different ways. But I think fundamentally there are just two things that you can do in marketing, which is, of course, this universal idea that you can create awareness / demand versus capture what's already there, people that are already looking for a solution, or maybe a specific product that they want to buy. So you have been a big proponent of programmatic SEO, right? I think this whole LinkedIn community that is connected with B2B marketing, following you, already know how how big of a fan you are. And I haven't seen probably another marketing leader to have such a specific, like be so specific around this whole idea of programmatic SEO that they've built those templates and those kind of things. So I really wanted to understand what made you think of programmatic SEO as a growth channel, especially like did you start it at UserPilot, or like what initiated this idea that this is something that I want to explore?
Yeah, so it was actually Brighton SEO conference. There was this whole panel last year, pretty much around a year ago. It was in April last year. We went, it was a panel on zero search volume keywords and new searches. As you probably know, like 15% of all searches every month are completely new searches, and also programmatic SEO. So there were these 3 talks there, including Mark Williams Cook's talk from Also Asked. It was really inspiring. And yeah, I saw all these examples of people generating millions of impressions with zero search volume keywords and generating these pages that are pretty much programmatically in some cases as well, or creating very short answers to super long-tailed keywords that again looks like if you type them in Ahrefs, it would just like return not applicable, 0, right, etc. But in reality, they were showing how they were getting thousands of hits from super qualified traffic with that. So that really inspired me and got me thinking. And then a few months later, I was on holiday actually, and I started Googling about programmatic SEO. And I stumbled upon a guy who was writing a blog. Actually, it wasn't me who came up with this whole idea of using Excel spreadsheets for this. It was him. He was called Sammy SEO, something like that. He was doing that in the context of affiliate marketing, of course. So, building affiliate sites, and he had this example of how he wanted to build several pages answering again a long-tailed question: can animal eat food? With animal and food being variables which you can swap around from your database and combine them kind of freely. So can dogs eat chocolate? Can cats eat chocolate? Can birds eat chocolate? But also, can dogs eat cheese? Can cats eat cheese? Can birds eat cheese? Etc. etc. So you see where this is going. And I started thinking, how can we apply this to our use case, where we're having issues with creating all these bottom of the funnel pages and then updating them whenever something changes. It's like, you probably know how fast things change in software, and just keeping up with your competitors and even yourself with updating the content, like the tools are constantly changing.
Yeah.
So that's one challenge. And then having enough, kind of combining all these tools and then combining them for different use cases, because we are all product adoption platforms, so we can be used for several different use cases. So it can be used onboarding, but it can be also churn prevention. It can also be, customer success. It can also be product adoption, go to market. So several use cases. So in fact, we have tons of these keywords, right? Like tool versus tool, which is better for use case, right? And I actually got food poisoning on this holiday, so I had 2 days where I wasn't doing anything. I was a bit bored, so I started working on my own template, and then it worked and it clicked. And we started implementing this with our team. It took a few months to sort of iron things out, because of course Excel formulas are quite vulnerable. So building out the databases, creating all the templates. We're still working on filling in the databases with content, because we want to do it properly. So do proper research on all the tools and all the use cases. It's very, very time consuming. But I feel it's paying off. We're able to create a lot of these bottom of the funnel, long-tailed keyword posts that are generated from up-to-date information. And and yeah, like kind of serve the intent really well. So instead of reinventing the wheel and every time each writer doing research on the same tool or copying and pasting, from our previous articles, we're able to sort of service that internally with these templates.
Right. Well, I have to say, the resources that you've shared on your Patreon are like incredibly helpful. We also at Flying Cat invested in programmatic SEO. We ran this campaign for one of our clients in the hospitality tech space, and we generated, I think, about maybe between 1,200 to 1,800 pages in about 2 to 3 months. And it worked out really well. There were some technical issues because we were doing it for the first time, but at this point, I think the last I checked, those pages all alone are generating about 50% of the conversions for that client, and that client is like massive in their own space. So like
that's amazing.
It worked really well. So
did you use Google Sheets as well, or did you?
Google Sheets. Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. I should do a case study with you on this.
Yeah, we would love to. My question would be, when do you think programmatic SEO makes sense for any company? Because with these new AI tools coming up, it looks like it's gonna be more and more people are going to be attracted towards this whole idea of building pages programmatically. So is there a specific point that you think a company should start thinking of this like programmatic SEO as a growth channel?
Yeah. So first of all, let's clarify. AI content and programmatic content are two separate things. And it's important to make that distinction. There's a lot of people, when I say, programmatic content, we're producing programmatic blog posts, they're like, AI, you're going to be penalized. This is bad quality. This is bad. And I'm like, no, we're not using AI for this, actually. So there is a massive difference, I think. Producing programmatic content does not need to involve AI at all. The AI tools are actually horrible at producing bottom of the funnel content.
Yeah, so true.
Yeah, they don't have access to recent data. They can't analyze. They only predict like the next, string of words, tokens. So it often doesn't make sense. The description, sometimes when you ask ChatGPT to give you, I tried this, pros and cons of several tools, they gave me the same information. So it obviously wasn't really real content. So it makes sense to invest in programmatic SEO, as I mentioned, in relation to the templates, when you have a lot of formulaic keywords that follow, the same pattern. So if you have a lot of competitors that you want to cover, if you have a lot of features, if you have a lot of use cases, if you have a lot of any kind of variable that you're comparing, right? So as you mentioned, hospitality industry, you could say best hotels in San Francisco, best hotels in California, best hotels in New York, best hotels in, and cover all the states, for instance, where you have rental properties, and include your rental properties as one of the best choices for this specific location. So it's great for local SEO. The example with animals, right? If you are selling pet accessories, right? Then obviously for all the different pets that you're selling accessories, that you're selling, supplements, etc., etc. Any of the variables that can be like easily swapped around to compare things. This is like a brilliant use case for programmatic SEO. Because these are quite specific product descriptions, especially for SaaS, like with tools, the descriptions need to be really specific. Ideally, the person writing the descriptions, filling in the database, should be actively using the tools. Right. They should have the feel for what they're writing about. It's not enough to go and scrape G2. And most of these, comparison review sites anyway prevent scraping, so they have mechanisms to prevent it. As an SEO, you probably realize that it's not that simple to just scrape the content.
Yeah,
but even
totally.
if you do it, it's still not super useful because it doesn't compare. And this is the search intent behind these keywords. The user wants to compare them. So you need to give them like how these tools compare. for specific use case, specific criterion. So this is where programmatic SEO really, really helps, because you can fill in the databases once. Of course, when something changes, you can update this in the database, and then you can automatically update all your content with these changes as well. So it not only helps generate new content, but it also helps keep the content up to date and up to scratch.
And what would you say to people who argue that when you create pages programmatically, you're sacrificing quality for quantity?
Yeah, so I think I just actually answered this question. And I was hoping you're going to ask this one next, because based on what I just said, it's quite obvious, I think, that producing these pages programmatically will lead to better quality, because you can really focus on this one entry in the database and really control it. So each row in your database is, say, one tool, one variable, right? One animal, one hotel, right? One supplement. And then in the columns, you have several categories, how you basically describe this variable, this item, this tool, this hotel. So you can have the latest images there. Something changes, you swap the images in the database for the most updated ones. So say screenshots of your dashboard, you add a new feature. In the features columns, you can update your feature list, etc., etc. And then you can just rerun the upload and basically update all your posts in a few seconds with the latest content. So unlike having writers create this content from scratch, and then you obviously will lose quality because the writers will not do an equally good job. And you're kind of, why would you write 10 times, about the same tool and pay someone for doing the same job 10 times? It just kind of doesn't make sense. So I have a background, actually, before I entered the content space. I worked in the translation industry, and there you actually have had computer-assisted translation tools, CAT tools, for quite a while. So these tools do exactly that. They, for instance, evaluate the number of unique tokens in a text. So the translator is kind of, maybe not penalized, but their pay is reduced based on the number of repetitions that are in the text. But we don't do the same for content. And most content teams were probably paying people over and over again for writing about the same tools, essentially.
Right.
So, there are a lot of arguments that sort of speak in favor of programmatic SEO for these specific use cases, these specific types of content, and that actually points to an increased quality for such content.
All right. So last question, kind of a loaded one. So you have worked with UserPilot, when they were kicking things off for their marketing department. So if, there's a new SaaS founder, and they come to you and they ask for advice on how they can kick things off. They don't have a lot of resources. They can't hire a team. They can't, they don't have the latest tech, access to latest tech that other established companies would have. And most probably they have a very small team. Maybe in some cases, the founder is the only person marketing the product. So what advice would you give to them super early stage to figure out the growth and marketing side of things?
Again, I would need more data. Because based on the description, I don't know, if the product has been validated, is it some kind of innovation that is pre-PMF, right? Or is it sort of a twist on an existing product that already is very established? So on that already depends a lot. Like, how saturated is the SEO channel for this? Right? If it's a pre-PMF product, that I would advise this person to invest in founder-led sales. So basically, get on LinkedIn, get on the phone, start cold emailing, right? The ideal or expected ideal customer persona. If, X is a big problem for them, and would they like to have a look at a solution? If it's a fairly established product, right, but maybe again a twist, then I would probably invest in programmatic SEO first. And I'm kind of doing a combination of both now on the weekends with my partner's SaaS, because he's also working on an SEO tool. It's a tool for it's a CRM essentially for monitoring and managing backlink building. So link exchanges, also monitoring the links. So basically agencies, link building agencies can run their operations more efficiently. So on the one hand, it's not an entirely validated market, right? Because there are very few solutions like that. On the other hand, he already has a few paying clients, including big agencies. So it seems like there is some, early signs of product market fit. So kind of it's a combination of both in that case, like cold outreach from the founder, right? And then programmatic SEO, which in this case will be a lot more challenging than in other niches, because SEO and marketing are so saturated that it's very hard to, when you have a completely new domain, break in. But I think it always works if you just are consistent enough and you put enough effort. It's just a matter of how long the founder can wait to put money on the table. So if it's a similar situation where the niche is very saturated, you should still be investing in the SEO content organic channel, but you may want to combine it with some like founder-led sales, as we're not talking about a proper outreach, outbound, cold outbound operation, because that can be extremely expensive operation compared to SEO, far, far more expensive. Even the UserPilot, it was only last year that we added that leg to our go-to-market strategy because it's so expensive to run.
So it looks like the setting that you would advise is like something to kick things off, something maybe like for like cold outreaching or something like that, and on the other hand also investing in long-term play of inbound marketing on something related to SEO or organic, right?
Yeah, totally. And you can also learn a lot from that outreach, both in terms of keyword inspiration and in terms of product direction. So that's also beneficial for an early stage founder. But definitely with the techniques that we have now, so programmatic SEO, so using the templates, and just what I did is I hired a bunch of cheap freelancers to just fill in the databases, right, with use cases and with tools, and that will result in already hundreds or thousands of articles that will start building that topical authority of the domain. And ultimately, you can build links to these posts as well, so you can kind of get your foot in the door. Typically, the commonplace, common sense advice these days is to start from bottom of the funnel keywords, so you can get conversions first. But if you are in a very competitive niche, it might be hard to even do that. So I talked to another head of content recently who actually did that, and she got very little traction because of how competitive her niche was. So if it's a very competitive niche, it makes sense to just say devote the first year on just building your topical authority. Like a very broad spectrum, not even looking at the conversions too much, because you sort of need to build up your domain rating first.
Right. Because you might end up creating those BOFU content pieces, but they might not be ranking.
Yeah, exactly. And you have to take that into account. But even if you create them and they are great, you may still need to put in the legwork, right, to build up your entire. So Google can recognize, okay, this domain is publishing good quality content on, say, backlinks, right?
Yeah, totally. Right. Thank you so much for doing this, Emilia, taking out the time. And I appreciate. It was lovely talking to you. It was amazing. There's a lot that I still want to unpack with you, but we'll leave it for some other time. So yeah.
Totally. And I need to grab a time on your calendar to chat about this case study.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.